Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Book Club of California's online and in-person program titled When Mountain Lions Are Neighbors. If you're joining us on Zoom, can you put something up there in the chat to let me know that you could hear me and see me? Yes, we are good to go. Great. My name is Kevin Kosick, and I'm the Executive Director for the Book Club of California, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all here and host the program this evening. For those of you that might be new to the Book Club of California, we are a nonprofit member and donor supported organization that is dedicated to preserving and promoting the history of the book and the book arts. Oftentimes we do that with a focus on the literature and the history of California and the West. The book club publishes limited edition books, a scholarly journal, and keepsakes for our members. We host a year-round series of exhibitions and programs like the one this evening on topics including fine printing, design, typography, bookbinding, collecting, California history, and much, much more. Now, if you're not a member of the book club, or if your membership has lapsed and you're interested in what we do, please consider joining our century-long tradition. Our membership dues are modest, the benefits are many, and we simply can't do the work of the book club without the support of our members. So I encourage you to visit us online at bccbooks.org to join, to donate, or to find out more. Now, tonight's program is titled When Mountain Lions Are Neighbors. Our speaker, Beth Pratt, has worked in environmental leadership roles for over 30 years and in two of the country's largest national parks, Yosemite and Yellowstone. She is currently the California Regional Executive Director for the National Wildlife Federation. Her innovative conservation work has been featured by The New Yorker. This is a long list. I'm not going to read every single place that she's been featured. I'll just give you the really, really important ones. The Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, BBC World Service, CNN, CBS This Morning, the Los Angeles Times, NPR, AP News, and many, many more. She is also the author of I Heart Wildlife and Yosemite Wildlife. Now, this is my favorite part about your intro. Beth makes her home outside of Yosemite with her dogs, cats, and the mountain lions, bears, foxes, frogs, and other wildlife that frequent her backyard. Tonight, Beth will be talking about When Mountain Lions Are Neighbors, People and Wildlife Working It Out in California. That's the full title. When Mountain Lions Are Neighbors, People and Wildlife Working It Out in California, which was released with a new preface last year from Heyday Books. Wildness beats in the heart of California's urban areas, and across the state, Californians are taking action to recast wildlife as an integral part of our everyday lives. In her book, Beth Pratt explores this evolving dynamic between humans and animals, and that's what you'll hear about tonight. Now, if you have questions for our speaker, please wait till the end of the presentation. We should definitely have time for some Q&A, and we'll take that from you here in the club rooms and from folks on Zoom. You can use the chat and the Q&A functions on Zoom if you have any questions or comments. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker, Beth Pratt.
Can everybody hear me? I think I turned the mic on right. So Kevin, I just want to thank you for the kind invite. As somebody who is a lover of books, what an honor to be here and to be among these books, which to me give me comfort in these really troubling times. So thank you. And to talk about such a hopeful project, and for me, a hopeful book, which is that I think if there's one thing most of us agree on, it's wildlife. You know, we might relate to wildlife differently, but we all agree that I think it's the rare person that if a bald eagle flies overhead doesn't stop and take notice. So, and I work in conservation and have for my whole career. This is a really hard time. I just got a text from a reporter I work with saying that I can never say it. My friend Heather will have to pronounce it. Doge has taken over the Interior Department and the National Park Service. As someone who's worked in parks my whole life, it's hard. But on the other hand, these are stories of hope that I want to talk about tonight and what is working. So really excited to be here, and thank you to all on Zoom. I think we have 150 on Zoom, or at least had signed up. So I think a lot of those are the LA folks. Thanks for coming. But thank all of you for coming in person, and let's talk about some stories of success. But what I wanted to start out was my journey, because part of these stories of success is to get you to think a little differently about wildlife and where wildlife should be and how we should do wildlife conservation. So I kind of wanted to start out with my journey, which, the photograph there of me in Yosemite is really how I started out thinking of where wildlife should be and what I should value in terms of nature. But I'll get into it. It really was P22 that kind of showed me the way, both scientifically and socially, about actually how we should be thinking about wildlife. This is me as a young girl, and somebody who always loved nature. And I was looking at books like this. I grew up in Boston. You will hear my accent come out a little bit, and I apologize. I have been doing relentless talks for about a week. I have a Senate hearing tomorrow, so I sound very hoarse. I'm losing my voice with all these talks, but it's for a good cause, so it's okay. But this is when I was a little girl, Massachusetts, we didn't have big mountains. We didn't have any wildlife when I was growing up in the 70s in my suburb of Boston. It had all been banished. The best I could hope for is a squirrel or frogs or snakes or turtles. We didn't even have raccoons or deer or coyote. Now, if you go back there now, everything's there, except for the mountain lion, which was hunted to extinction. But you have deer and bobcats and coyotes, so they're coming back. But I had to dream of these big landscapes with wildlife when I was a little girl, because I didn't have it in Massachusetts. And these was the list I made when I was a little girl, saying, I want to visit and work in these places. And there's Yosemite. And I did. This was my first visit to Yosemite in 1992. I arrived in California in 1991, and I fell in love. Yosemite had me at hello. I had never seen anything like it in my entire life. We have little mountains on the East Coast, right? I mean, I just was in awe. I was literally in tears. I also got lucky on my first visit in that there was a snowstorm, and I had a four-wheel drive vehicle, and they actually ended up closing the valley that day. I had the valley to myself. When do you have the valley to yourself, right? Yosemite Valley. And I'm making a snowman and looking at Yosemite Falls, and this coyote followed me. And that was it. Yosemite became sort of my North Star, and has been. I live outside Yosemite, which I'll talk about in a moment, and have for 26 years. But I also took 4 years and worked in Yellowstone. To me, the national parks are everything. Yellowstone is amazing. I mean, look at the wildlife I lived with. I would wake up to wolves howling, river otters, bison. What Yellowstone really showed, I mean, grizzly bears. I saw 9 grizzly bears in one day, right? And I think what Yellowstone really did was remind us what we've lost in this country, the abundance of wildlife. Like, we see one deer in California, like, whoa, a deer in my garden. I couldn't get to work sometimes. It was an acceptable excuse to be late to work because you had 1,000 elk in your driveway and you couldn't get out the door. This is what we've lost in this country. It's reminiscent. Heather and I did an amazing trip to Africa. When was that? 2023. It wasn't last year. 2023. Yeah. And, that's what I think it's the only place we have on this continent that's reminiscent of Africa, where there's just hundreds and thousands of everything. But it's a beautiful place. But I'll tell you, it was freezing. Oh, my God. You'd have weeks of it wouldn't get above 0 during the day. So as much as this, I loved working there. California really became home, in Yosemite itself. So I had kept my home there. And even though now I worked for 10 years for the Yosemite Conservancy as their vice president, even though I work now for the National Wildlife Federation and do a lot of work in LA, it's kind of a second home. Yosemite's still home. I live on the southwest border outside the park, and I spend every spare moment, especially in high country. For me, happiness is above tree line. Gila Lakes Basin is one area I study wildlife. I'll get into the Dana Plateau, which is right outside the park. That's Mount Kenness for those of you who are Yosemite aficionados. But this is my home. This is right outside the border of the park. You can actually see that is the border of Yosemite in that photo in the background. And just love it. Population 300. Here's my little cabin. And as I thought it was appropriate, Kevin didn't know what I was going to talk about, but I am proudest of that too, that almost every wildlife that should be in the Sierra is on my 6 acres. And I have 6 dogs, but they are fenced, they are not out. And it is great to know that most of my home is kind of a mini national park. The wildlife get primacy. That is, if you look at this photo is taken right here. So that is about 5 feet from my door. When my dogs bark, I know something's out there. This is about 50 feet from my house. Wait for it. Oh, little cubs. Who doesn't love bear cubs? And this was actually this summer, this was 1 week in my backyard for my trail cameras. Bobcat youngsters. That's a male mountain lion that makes an appearance about once every 6 months on my property. I have gray foxes and the bobcats have raised generations there. It's great to see the new kittens and pups every year. Hummingbird. And then I was really honored this year. It's the ultimate compliment where a female mountain lion made 3 appearances with her. At the time she had 3 kittens, but ended up with 2 on my property. It was magical. So the reason I show all these is when mountain lions are neighbors is not just a figurative title. I literally have mountain lions as neighbors, and so do most of you in California. 50% of California is mountain lion habitat. So it is likely that all of you live or at least recreate or travel to places where mountain lions are. Wolves are another animal. This is OR93 who made a miraculous journey. Here's a map of it. Unfortunately, was hit on the 5 down near LA, but came within 15 miles of my house. And this is such a hopeful story that wolves are coming back to California. And it's a story I feature in my book. At the time, OR7 had entered California. It was the first wolf in 100 years to step foot in the state. And I publicly predicted at the time we'd have wolves in the Sierra in 10 years. And I was absolutely right. That's what OR93 made his journey, but also we now have a pack south of Fresno and Sierra National Forest. So wolves are back in this state and they came on their own, which is a really hopeful story. Some of the stories I tell in When Mountain Lions Are Neighbors have to do with Yosemite. There's a whole chapter on the park's bears. And they are such an interesting story because their history, again, you think of Yosemite as a wild place, right? But the bears, it is one of the hardest places to be a wild bear in California. You know, Yosemite Valley is Disneyland. It's a city. You have temptations. So, you know, there's just such amazing stories in the park. Another incredible animal that again is in when mountain lions are neighbors is the Yosemite toad, and endemic to the Sierra. They only exist in a 250 square mile area in the Sierra. Tugga Pass area is a really good place to see them. I mean, when do you see a toad walking over snow? They are high elevation toads. We don't know a lot about them, but they come out and travel up to a mile over snow to find a mate. It is insane what they do. This is why I love wildlife. This is what keeps me sane, is their wondrous actions. So this is actually really rare footage. My friend who's a mentor, he's the aquatic biologist for the park, says, we just don't have much footage of Yosemite toads over snow, or hadn't at this time. And I had to work for this, I'll tell you. I had to walk through sun cups and stuff. But imagine how cold that is. That is snow melt. Look at this little guy. He is gonna dive right in. Now I think he thought I was a date. It's pretty lonely up there. So he swam over to be like, hey, who are you? You a toad? It is really competitive. The males can outnumber the females 10 to 1. So he wasn't real judgmental if I wasn't a toad. And the thing that is phenomenal about this wondrous wildlife is what they sound like. That's a toad. When I first heard it, I thought it was a bird. Isn't that amazing? Here they are, having some fun. You think, your dating life's hard. Imagine you have to walk over snow for a mile. Some other animals I study in the park are butterflies, especially high elevation butterflies. It is, just a wondrous place. Mariposa County, where I live, named for butterfly. I study the low elevation this time of year, and then I head high. Again, you don't think of butterflies as being at 12,000 feet, but indeed there are butterflies in Yosemite that only live at high elevations. This is one of them. This is an Arctic butterfly, and they are evolved to match granite. Try spotting these guys. It is the challenge, but these are amazing butterflies that, are almost always on granite. You don't see them on flowers except for when they come out to breed in the spring. They're a rare butterfly that is endemic to the Sierra. But as some of you know who follow me on social media, the pika, when I get asked what my favorite animal is, it does change sometimes, but no, it really is the pika. This animal is incredible. It is the cutest animal on the planet, yet it's also one of the most badass ones. And they live at only high elevations in the Sierra. They do live in other places at lower. The Columbia River Gorge in Oregon has a low elevation population, but at least in California, they are at high elevations. They don't hibernate. They literally gather vegetation, stack it like hay, and that's what they live on under the snow in the winter. They sail over the rocks. Good luck trying to catch one of these guys. They are amazing. They're about as charming as can be. They're very social. If you sit and are still, they'll come out and eat lunch with you, like this little guy. And they have a really cute, my ringtone is there. They have a fun kind of lyrical language. I miss them in the off season. They're under the snow in the winter, so don't get to see them. They also have the cutest butts. Look at those little pika butts. How can you not love that? Look at that. It's little pajama bottom feet. And they also have cute poop. Look at that. That's pika poop. So they get, they really rank a mention in the Yosemite chapter in the book just because of their intrepidness. And again, when we think of wildlife as neighbors, you may think, why am I mentioning the Yosemite toad and the pika that live at high elevations and really don't have people as neighbors? Our actions still impact them. Those are two animals greatly threatened by climate change. So, for me, if I had to describe my job in, a quick sentence, it is to get people to think of wildlife as neighbors. Neighbors, we don't always get along with our neighbors. Sometimes they aggravate us, but we have to look at them as equal and neighbors and, do what we can to help build a community around them. This one I always throw in, the Sierra Newt is one of my favorite. They're called water dogs. They're just absolutely adorable. And you can see them. There are a different species of newt in the Bay Area, but they're pretty cool. Some other ones, Sierra Nevada red fox is an endemic that is about one of the rarest land mammals in North America. They showed up after 100 years in Yosemite, so the wildlife is trying to come back. The great gray owl is one of the subspecies endemic to Yosemite, another wondrous tale, along with the peregrine falcon. Again, and looking at wildlife as neighbors and how to help them. This peregrine falcon was on their way out because of DDT. And you have the rock climbing community come together, including Yvonne Chenard, around Yosemite's peregrines, helped bring foster peregrines up to nests. And now peregrines are back. It shows how the Endangered Species Act does its job. And not just in Yosemite. I'll tell you some Bay Area stories of peregrines, but they're in urban areas as well. And then one of my favorite finds in Yosemite is the Yosemite Cave studio scorpion, which is literally about the size of your fingernail, that was just discovered a few years ago. So there's some wondrous neighbors we have in Yosemite. It's pretty amazing. And this is a book I've been working on for decades, really. It'll be out in October that features a lot of these stories. I'm really proud of it, not just because I wrote it, but a lot of stories you have not heard of the park's wildlife. And here's just one sample page. We're getting close to going to press. Of course, the pika gets the most ink in the book. So, but you know, for me, the when mountain lions are neighbors, even though it features a lot, you know, one chapter on Yosemite and how again our actions outside the park impact the wildlife as neighbors inside the park. What really got me thinking differently about wildlife was P22. When I started writing this book with Heyday in 2014, it was not titled this. It was just going to be a book on California wildlife for my job. But then P22 really took over. That story just became everything. That in California, we are doing things and living with wildlife in a way that other states are not. And that to me needed to be celebrated. You know, you look at a P22 who shows up in Griffith Park. Any other state, he would have been removed or killed immediately. What happened there? He becomes the Brad Pitt of mountain lions. Everybody loves him. He's a celebrity. He's celebrated. We build, and I'll get into it, $100 million wildlife crossing in his honor. And this is what got me thinking differently, because I really came up in the mode of conservation where you keep wildlife and people separate. But I now know both socially and scientifically that is not what works. And listen, for P22 and for me, Hollywood was not my natural ecosystem. You know, I mean, I'm a Bostonian who likes to be in the woods. I had to learn to appreciate the LA area. Now I love it. I think some amazing stuff is going on down there. They have more open space than up here. I mean, they have, you know, Santa Monica Mountains are like being in Yosemite, and they have a thriving mountain lion population. So it was quite a journey for me to kind of come from this lifetime or half a lifetime of a national park background to look at what this urban wildlife, human and wildlife on the same landscape was. I had never walked a red carpet before. I still have a hard time in heels, but this is what it takes. If you're going to do wildlife conservation in Hollywood, when in Rome, and I had never worked on an infrastructure project before. If you had told me I'd be leading one of the largest infrastructure projects in the state, I would have laughed at you 15 years ago, but here we are. But it's what it takes to save wildlife. And I do owe it all to this story of P22. And P22 didn't just change my perspective, he changed the world's perspective, and I'll get into that. I'm going to play, this is a 4-minute video, but I think it's worth playing because it enables you to get to know P22. Or I don't know, Kevin, are you broadcasting this on YouTube?
No.
It's just Zoom. Okay, because it does have a song. Sometimes they shut it down, so it's good to know. But this video, which we played at his celebration of life, I think really shows you how this cat was navigating a very human landscape and navigating it well. For 10 years, he coexisted in Griffith Park. He didn't become used to humans. He would still retreat to the furthest reaches of Griffith Park. Indeed, National Park Service research showed that he shifted his hunting strategies. Mountain lions typically hunt from dusk to dawn, but these urban cats, indeed, it isn't that P22 got used to us. He shifted his strategies to avoid us. he shifted to hunting just at the very latest hours of night, which shows you these cats are still doing the best they can to avoid us. But this shows you what a landscape he had to navigate. Watch that video. I get sad, but then I remind myself P-22 is 12 years old when he passed away. That is ancient for a mountain lion. That's like 110 in human years. And he lived in this very dense part of LA for 10 years, and people celebrated it. So that to me actually is a happy ending, as much as his lack of connectivity didn't enable him to fully be a mountain lion. That we made space for a mountain lion in the second largest city in the country is a hopeful story. You know, he started out as kind of this LA story, but it was this Steve Winter's photograph in National Geographic in 2013 that made him what I call the Brad Pitt of cougars. He became internationally beloved, even looks like Brad Pitt. I'm still waiting for the cease and desist order from Brad's lawyers, because I started using this phrase and then all the media picked it up. But you know, he really became a beloved celebrity, like a celebrity. He had his celebrity posse as well. Rainn Wilson did one of our earliest PSAs. Gavin Newsom's dad, you know, it's been an honor working with Governor Newsom on this project. Whatever you think of him politically, he's all for wildlife. He has really been a great supporter of this work. And where else in the country would you have a governor tweeting out, "A mountain lion will always have their heart"? Like, that is something to celebrate as well. This was my favorite celebrity encounter, Viggo Mortensen. His carrying the P-22 plushie made the LA Times. I was both mortified because I love Viggo Mortensen, but I'm like, okay, this works. Sean Penn, who I knew as Spicoli, Fast Time at Ridgemont High. I never thought I'd be walking a red carpet with him, and he was so smart. Like, he was asking me about genetics, and he was very interested in the cause. And I show these not to name drop or anything, but to show you the reach this cat had, right? The story, the plight of this cat attracted attention, whether it be the general public or celebrities around the world. When he was hiding under a house one day, Time Magazine was following this. There was helicopters circling. They had cordoned off the neighborhood. And it wasn't because people were afraid of him. It was because people wanted to see him. It's like if Brad Pitt showed up at your house, you'd be like, oh my God, everybody's here. It was quite something to watch. I mean, P-22 has been a question on Jeopardy. Kids love him. They relate to his story. He's a library card. This is Warren Dixon. He's a hip hop artist from Watts. Has written a whole series of songs about him. There's a cycling club for P-22. He has his own museum exhibit, which was supposed to be temporary for 6 months, but it was the most visited exhibit they had ever had. So it's now a permanent exhibit. I was just at the tea shop right next door getting some matcha before the talk. And there was 2 people drinking tea, and I had the cutout, and they're like, that's P-22, isn't it? I'll be in New York City with a P-22 shirt on, and people are like, hey, that's P-22. He is perhaps the most famous animal, that I can think of in our future. We have an annual P-22 Day festival in his honor. 15,000 people every year learning about coexisting, how to be neighbors with wildlife. And then when he died, nothing had prepared me, even though I know how popular he was, for the outpouring of grief around the world when he died. And as the person who had to sit with him the day before he was euthanized, it was really hard. But it was also wonderful to see how the world celebrated his life. I was working with the Department of Fish and Wildlife officials, so I knew it was coming. We had a statement prepared, and I tweeted that out right after we made the announcement, with the head of Fish and Wildlife, Chuck Bonham, who's a great guy, crying in the video. Again, when do you see a Department of Fish and Wildlife person crying when they make an announcement? In fact, some states criticized him for anthropomorphizing, which was just a load of bull. But nonetheless, I think I just shut off my alerts. My tweet had like 10,000 shares in 15 minutes. People were really vested in this cat. The Wall Street Journal, not known for being a green newspaper, this is the spread they gave to P-22. Rolling Stone covered P-22's death, right? He was trending on Twitter. Do you know what you have to do to trend on Twitter when he died? It was quite something. And these were some memorials that popped up around LA, which was quite wonderful to see. People were really grieving. Governor Newsom tweeted out what P-22 meant to him. And when we were seeing all this grieving and the extent it was spreading both locally and globally, we knew we had to do something. And we contacted the Greek Theater. This is us being crazy. Can we do something there? And they're like, sure. And so we staged this memorial, which I'm going to show you a quick video of, because again, think about this. Think about the value shift as seeing a mountain lion as a neighbor enough to do a 6,000 people gathering at the Greek Theater. He crashed Ticketmaster, much like Taylor Swift did, because so many people wanted to attend.
Thousands packed the Greek Theater today to celebrate the life of P-22, the famous mountain lion who lived for years in Griffith Park.
Only in LA would a beautiful wild animal like P-22 come and live, and residents would demand and clamor that he be allowed to stay here, and stay he did for over a decade.
P-22 is way more than a celebrity. He is an important ambassador for urban wildlife. P-22's legacy will live on in his contributions to wildlife conservation and also our heightened awareness of how to live in harmony with nature. And he even got me to the Greek.
The LA Times calls him the most famous animal since Lassie. But there was 9 Lassies and there was only one P22.
I had the distinct pleasure of being P22's representative in Congress, where one of my highest priorities has been to protect more of the public lands that P22 called home. That work will continue with P22's spirit guiding us every step of the way.
California is demonstrating people and nature can thrive together.
We need to not just live in harmony in nature, but we have to recognize that we are nature. And what happens to them happens to us. We are all connected.
We have been part of one of the greatest wildlife stories in history, all because we realize the most important thing we can do for another being is to let them be who and what they are.
P22, you inspired me to become an architect so I could build more wildlife crossing bridges to support the movement of wildlife. Thank you.
He changed us. He changed the way we look at LA as he inspired millions of people to see wildlife as their neighbors. We are part of nature, and he reminded us of that.
It's amazing that he persisted for 10 years and that you all and everyone coexisted with him in an amazing way for that time. So I just want to say to P22, thank you for the lessons that you taught us. Thank you for the impressions you made on us. And thank you for the legacy you left us. Long live P22.
All right, and I want you to sing along with me. P22, P22, you left behind a lot of friends and cougar poo. P22, oh P22, all of Los Angeles is gonna miss you.
You can see the full version of that song online. Rain texted me that morning, can I sing a song? I'm like, sure, I don't care. But he wrote a custom song for P22. It was really one of the highlights. But, you know, I show all this because it's not just celebrity. P22's influence stretched around the globe for a new conservation ethic, both about coexisting with large predators, but also what do we need to do to ensure they remain. I mean, to me, the kids, they get this. It was really wonderful to see how they responded to P22, whether wanting to build crossings. I do a lot of school talks, and it's just astounding to see it. But this, you know, for me, how people connected with him in different ways, but they did. This was a couple who P22 would walk in between their house and another house every day for about a week, and he'd come back over the years. And he'd just look in like a neighbor. Hey, how's it going? They're eating dinner, and keep going. And there's no fear here. It was, wow, we just saw something magical. And that's the ethic, at least I want people to be with wildlife. It's never zero risk with wildlife, but it's not zero risk with people, right? I mean, my God, I'm more afraid of people than, you know, the mountain lion on the landscape. And it was this new ethic that when I saw this happening in real time, it was quite something to see. And again, this is what the book really focuses on. When P22 decided to eat next to the pika, one of the cutest animals on the planet, a koala in the LA Zoo, which is in Griffith Park, that could have been game over. Like, we're like, oh God, this isn't good. What happened? The LA Zoo apologized. Oops, our fences weren't big enough. The New York Times, which never gets LA right, but you know, even called in this LA Times a local paper, but that, wait, what's going on with LA? Why is LA okay with this? And I think this is where the world started watching, like something's going on here. And it got at this, which is, and I would say the same for all wildlife, large and small. Just because a mountain lion is there doesn't mean it's dangerous, any more than if another human is with you does not mean it's dangerous. Indeed, I like people to put the risk in perspective. Mountain lions in a state of 40 million people. Since 1890, there have been less than 50 verified attacks and 7 have been fatal. Now, those 7 are real people, and we never want it to happen. But if you are worried about your safety, those are so random, don't get in your car. 4,000 deaths a year from our automobiles. And as a female, I hike alone, I hike in remote areas all the time. I'm more worried about people. There's 100 sexual assaults on women a day. 140 women, I think I read, was killed a day, right? So just put the risk in perspective. It's never zero, but your stepladder is more dangerous than a mountain lion. And I think that's what people really realized in LA, and so much so that it wasn't just about P22. It became about ensuring a future for the entire mountain lion population around there, wanting them as permanent neighbors. This is my favorite photo of P22. It's another Steve Winter photo. The Hollywood sign is the most famous, but this shows you what he endured. This is what he looked at every day. And this is what the whole population of mountain lions in the Santa Monica Mountains are facing. They are trapped by freeways. And what I love is not just LA, not just California, but the world came together to give, if not P22, his own Hollywood ending himself, the population of mountain lions there to endure. He did lead to the creation of the world's largest overpass, and we owe that to him. It is really an honor to work on this project. It's been hard, it's been 13 years, but it is the most hopeful construction project in the world, as my colleague Lauren Gill calls it. Here we are at groundbreaking. There's Gavin Newsom and Wallace Annenberg, who again, another visionary person who stepped up and said, I want this to happen, and funded an enormous donation of private philanthropic dollars. This is a current photo. I think it was taken 3 weeks ago. It is really coming along. This is the 101 portion. We put the first soil on the bridge. On my birthday, it happened to be March 31st. That's Jeff Sikich, one of the lead scientists who literally his research led to us knowing there was a problem, and whose research with the National Park Service led to us knowing what we had to do. Here we are. That's the waterfall of soil going on the bridge. And we'll be planting, I'm going to skip the video. We'll be planting the first plants on the bridge at the end of May, early June. LA Times, one of the major newspapers of the world, front page above the fold, an article about soil. You know, again, this is such a hopeful project. The world really is interested in what's happening here. Here's the visualization of what it'll look like. Currently, the structure over the 101 is finished. The soil's on, we'll be planting. We then have to relocate. You can see this road right here is Agora Road. In between the two portions, there are utilities. We are undergrounding those. And then we start on the Agora Road structure. And everything should be finished, I'm guessing, mid to late 2026. So it's really going to be amazing to contemplate that first wildlife going over the crossing. This is another version of it. And I like to really stress that although we use mountain lions as the poster cat for this crossing, because they are the ones most eminently at risk of extinction, this is being designed for all wildlife. It is a full native habitat on the top. Everything from monarchs to mountain lions will use this crossing. And so this cat became a neighbor, became part of our community. And I think for me, what's really exciting is how that radiated out. How it radiated out where Senator Padilla introduced bipartisan legislation with Loomis of Wyoming with a photo of P22 next to him. How I've now toured crossings all over the country who are advancing because they look to LA as an example. It is really wonderful that the Wallace Annenberg crossing didn't just become a one-off. I just had a meeting with 200 people with Secretary Crowfoot for our new California Wildlife Reconnected initiative, where we're gonna do more crossings across California. And it's all because this cat became a neighbor we cared about. So that's, as I wrap up here before we get to questions, that's what I want people to think about wildlife differently. This is what I grew up thinking an appropriate place for wildlife. This is Hayden Valley in Yellowstone, one of my favorite places on the planet. And it is beautiful. But this is what we grew up, thinking wildlife should be here. But we really need to shift our thoughts a little bit, our perspective, because we also need this. Now, I am not at all advocating for backing off on protections like places for Yosemite, but we need to open up our human spaces to wildlife, or else they're not going to have a future, both scientifically and socially. We need it. This is a video. I thought I'd throw in some Bay Area stories since I'm talking here. I'm not often in the Bay Area, but I used to live in Berkeley. It's nice to be up here. These are two deer that wanted to go to Marin for the weekend, and like all of us. Yeah, and I got to watch this real time on the Golden Gate. I was watching it on Twitter like, oh my God. But what I found wondrous about this was rush hour and people had slowed down and let the deer pass. But we can't always rely on that, right? Our wildlife are using our landscapes in ways every day that we might not even be aware of. These are coyotes in downtown LA. I know you have coyotes all over San Francisco as well. And they are coming back, and it's up to us to welcome them as neighbors. I don't know who remembers Sutro Sam. You guys remember Sutro Sam? Shows up at the Sutro Baths. He was one of the first river otters back in San Francisco in years. I got to go see him. It was people were gathered around. It was again like a celebrity showed up. People wanted that magic, that connection to wildlife. Peregrine falcons, I mentioned how Yosemite had a lot to do with that comeback. They're now everywhere. Now this is great. This is El Capitan in Yosemite, great peregrine falcon habitat, right? It is. Peregrine falcons need high cliffs to raise their young, but open areas to shoot down like a rocket and get their prey. Well, the San Jose City Hall is basically a man-made El Capitan and just as good peregrine habitat as El Cap. The peregrine isn't on the City Hall going, I wish I was in Yosemite. They're not. They used that and used it well. This is a photo from literally the mayor's office that I took of a peregrine. If you don't mess with peregrines, if he was bigger, if the window wasn't there, he probably would have tried to eat me. But they are trying, and it is up to us to be good neighbors and let them thrive. This is another success story. These are barn owls nesting in an eave here at the Marriott Hotel, San Francisco Airport Bay. And I love this. Another success story. The Marriott, instead of getting rid of them, said, wait a minute, let's create something around this. They rented it out as the Hoot Suite. They had little education and little stuffed owls for the kids and really welcomed their barn owl neighbors. And the guests, they even had instructions for viewing the barn owls, so you didn't disturb them if you were in that room. They were really wonderful. The Facebook foxes, I'm not sure if they're still there, but again, Facebook, instead of getting rid of these foxes, they didn't pet them, they didn't feed them, but they treated them as neighbors. They belong there. I'll tell you, I want to live on the Facebook campus. I got to visit it. It was amazing. And, the employees would be like, oh, okay, I guess we can't go home. There's foxes on our car. And it was really wonderful to see this. And again, they weren't treating them as pets. And Mark Zuckerberg himself tweeted out about the Facebook foxes. And I asked for a raise after this because I think at the time, he had 50 million followers. This was 15 years or 10 years ago. But they became an NWF certified habitat. So for all those folks to, again, make way for the foxes and to shift their practices so the foxes could thrive was a hopeful story. My friend Bill Kinnear, he's an amazing scientist. He was pioneering some research in the San Francisco Bay of harbor porpoises. And it became one of the best places in the world to study them because they are, unlike dolphins, pretty secretive creatures. And Bill spent a lot of his time on the Golden Gate Bridge taking photos. If you think you see dolphins in San Francisco Bay, it's probably porpoises. That's how I met him. Submitted some photos. Are these dolphins? He's like, no, porpoises. And I was just a couple months ago scattering my dad's ashes in San Francisco Bay, and the porpoises came out when we were scattering them. So it was pretty wonderful. But you have a scientific sort of premier study by Bill. He now works at the Marine Mammal Center on harbor porpoises and other marine wildlife, and they are starting to come back to the bay. Some of that might not be good because of climate change, but some of it is good that the bay was cleaned up and the wildlife is returning. So being good neighbors. And just a couple more before I finish. You got in Joshua Tree, there's a desert tortoise sanctuary, or they might have moved at this point. Every Marine and basic training received education on desert tortoises. And if they were doing sort of mock warfare, they had to shut down if they saw a desert tortoise. So that was pretty cool. This is an LA story, but I love it. This is Meatball the bear. He was known for roaming around Glendale and breaking into fridges in the garage and eating Costco meatballs. That's why he's named that. And, you know, it was interesting in that this could go south pretty quickly, but the residents soon felt guilty. He had to be, because he was so used to human food, had to be relocated to a sanctuary. And what they ended up doing was raising money so he could have a bigger enclosure, and also created a coexisting with wildlife Rose Bowl parade float. So they wanted to be good neighbors to wildlife. I think that's a success story. So I'll end with this. I think, you know, my book and my work gets into what we need to do to be good neighbors to wildlife. You know, the bridge, obviously I work on an actual bridge, literally, but figuratively, how do we build a bridge to that animal world? Henry Baston and The Outermost House, a year on Cape Cod, which is a wonderful book. I'm gonna butcher the quote, but he says, we need to consider wildlife as, you know, not friends, not enemies, but just fellow prisoners of the earth, awash in this splendor. And that's what I ask people to do, whether it's a spider in your house, whether it's a mountain lion in your backyard. How do we build these bridges to the animal world? Because I'll tell you, they will not have a future if we don't. It is, let me skip to these slides. It is pretty dire right now. I'm not going to give up my work, but we have a biodiversity collapse that is unprecedented. I'm not an alarmist. It's pretty bad. And even if you don't like wildlife for wildlife's sake, healthy ecosystems and wildlife are tied to our own. We are wildlife. We are part of nature. And it is just shameful and hubris that we would think otherwise. If you look at the COVID epidemic, part of what fueled that was unhealthy ecosystems. You go back east to where the eastern panther, just another name for mountain lion, was hunted to extinction. What do you have? An overpopulation of deer. What do you also have there? Lyme disease and rates that we don't have. So our health, our well-being is tied to the health of fellow animals and healthy ecosystems. So it's really important to get this right. And I have a quote in the new preface to my book that the best way to do this, I'm a scientist, it's not my day job, but I do consider myself a scientist. Science will only get you so far. You need the science to back up your actions, but what gets wildlife crossings built? What gets animals put on the endangered species list? What gets these conservation actions taken is not the science. It is people connecting. It is people loving. It is people valuing wildlife as neighbors and not as things, not as objects, not as inconveniences. So find your P22, whether it's a monarch, butterfly, which is another animal on its way out. There was millions of them when we were kids. The latest Western count, 9,000. That butterfly is gonna go if we don't do something. So find that neighborhood animal. Get people engaged in it. Think of wildlife as neighbors, and we'll both have a more flourishing future and a more meaningful one. I can't think of a world without wildlife that would be meaningful. So thank you so much.
Wow, you have like a great job.
Yeah.
Well, stay on the
Sorry, I
camera.
gotta stand
I'll stay over here. You can stay on the camera.
Sounds good.
And we'll take a couple of questions from the audience, or if you're out there on Zoom and you have a question, now would be the time to post it. Yes.
What's actually in the collar, around his collar, is it below and above?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we get asked a lot, isn't that, you know, hurting the mountain lions and stuff? Listen, I actually wear that collar. I do an annual P22 hike. I retrace his route to Griffith Park. It's 50 miles. And I wear it, I hardly notice it. So him with all his muscle and stuff. What's on it is GPS tracking and some other monitoring stuff. The reason it's that bulky, and I think technology will get there, is because of battery life. If you wanted it to be less bulky, you'd have to catch the mountain lion more frequently. That lasts about a year to 2 years. You know, you just anesthetizing a mountain lion to put, you know, it's risky. So that's why it's so bulky. I think they'll come down, but honestly, I hardly notice it. So, you know, and I'm one of the biggest animal rights person there is if I thought it was hurting them. But also this research is so important. We wouldn't know these mountain lions weren't extinct if it wasn't for the research. So that one, I don't think it's really impacting.
There's no camera?
No, there's no camera. In fact, what's interesting is they are starting to come out with some of those that, Again, it's battery life. You put a camera on there, but I was just talking with Jeff Sickich, the lead biologist, and they're looking at some of these cameras. And again, the technology is getting better. The battery life is better. That would be cool because GPS will only get you so far, right? In fact, these cats, we don't get real time. People think, can't you just tell us? You get 1 point an hour during the night when they're most active, and then 1 daytime point. So when you combine it with camera footage, you get even a better idea of how they're moving.
Yeah.
All that camera footage that you showed, that other people's cameras that you collected, they were like their for their home security and stuff like that.
Yeah, we put out a
little bit about that.
Yeah, it was really, it was both hard when he passed away. We had a lot because what was wonderful is, again, the camera footage is important since we don't have real-time GPS. So over the 10 years P22 was in Griffith Park, again, people became really vested in them. They would share with researchers their videos or pictures of sightings. But when he died, we put out a call like, hey, any P22 footage you have, please share with us. We want to make sure, this is archived, but also we're going to put together a video. And boy, did people respond. Yeah, Ring cameras. I mean, there was footage we hadn't seen before. So that was really special.
Carol and Beth.
What did he eat besides koalas?
Yeah.
Repeat the question.
Yeah, the question was, what did he eat beside koalas? Which, he just thought it was a raccoon. I do think it is interesting the first time in evolutionary history of 100 million years that a mountain lion ate a koala. They just would never meet, right? So for him, it was a weird looking raccoon. But so mountain lions have evolved in California, especially, to eat mule deer. That's what they want. Now they are cats. How many have cats? Cats pounce on anything, right? But majority of their food is mule deer. The National Park Service research I showed, you talk about a hard job. They hike through poison oak, charting rotting carcasses to chart what mountain lions eat. And they know for the most part, because when a mountain lion kills a deer, they kill about 1 every week, maybe 2 weeks. They stay in the same place for a week and feed on it, right? It's kind of there. P22, 87% of his prey was mule deer. Now, raccoons, skunks, coyotes, bobcats, they'll go after them. Smaller pets, sure. Cats, dogs, absolutely. But they're really, they're opportunistic, but on the most part, the energy that it takes to hunt something, they want that deer. They really do. Now, our livestock, because it resembles deer, it is much easier to catch. I'll tell you, these predators, we think they're, it is hard work. They can't just go to In-N-Out Burger like us. I think like mountain lions and wolves are successful maybe like 20% of the time. So when you come across a penned, herd of goats, hey, have at it, right? You're going to take advantage of that if you're a cat. But it really is mule deer is the top on this diet. They will take advantage of smaller prey, but they want that mule deer.
Take a couple more questions. Peter?
Do you have a sense from the footage that the P22 was somewhat camera aware?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, obviously some of the Ring cameras don't make noise and stuff, but these animals absolutely are camera aware. I think one of the things I struggle with, and I know I work with Jeff Sickich, is we owe a lot of the success of this campaign to coexistence and to building that crossing to the incredible camera footage. Yet it does disturb the wildlife. You get these big flashes, they will change their routes. To wildlife, darkness is safety. One of the things we have to do with our wildlife crossing is ensure that the lights from the freeway are not blinding them. Noise also, they do not like noise. So quietness is safety. So they're very camera aware. If you looked at that footage I just showed in my backyard, now I actually don't use a flash. I use red glow, which is no flash, but they hear the click, right? And I can't even hear it, but they're hearing it. So they are aware. And I would say P22 is very aware of at least the cameras that made noise. The Ring cameras are pretty quiet, So yeah, these animals absolutely are camera aware. Some of them destroy the cameras. Like some of these bears pick them up and I'm like, yeah.
We'll do one last question. Do we have another question here?
You had mentioned going to Washington to testify. Does that have to do with ecological systems or National Park Service issues or?
This is before the current. This is actually a positive thing where, again, Senator Padilla did a hearing a bipartisan hearing on, Senator Padilla loved P-22. It opened his eyes to wildlife crossings, and now he spoke at P-22's memorial, but via video. So that was before, but yeah, I am having to spend a lot of time lately defending the public lands federally and the research. Where this crossing is the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area. Yosemite, I have friends who have laid off or are now cleaning bathrooms as scientists. I think it's 40%, I can't remember the exact percentage, but 40% of California is federal lands. Those start going, and we don't have much control over that, even though Newsom obviously would do what he can. He's a big wildlife guy. That's going to impact our wildlife in California. So I'm spending more and more on the federal, my organization, the National Wildlife Federation, does a lot of advocacy, especially now in this area. You know, public lands and our wildlife are a wild heritage that typically in my lifetime, we've always agreed on. If you had told me I had to be on CNN recently, which I had to be, defending national parks, I wouldn't have believed you, but here we are. So yeah, that's taking up some of my time now too.
Thank you.
And with that, please join
Thank
me
you,
in thanking our Beth Pratt. You gotta circle it this way and just wrap up. So thanks everyone for joining us here in the club rooms and joining us on Zoom. It's always great to see you in person. It's always great to have you as a virtual audience. You can register for any book club event online at bccbooks.org/programs, or by using the link in any of the emails that you're probably getting from the Book Club of California. We hope you'll come back and join us again. So again, one more time, let's thank our speaker, Beth Pratt. And thank you again for joining us. Hope to see you again soon. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.